Hi everybody, today it's September 5 and I want to give you another update on my founder trajectory. I'm still in week 2 and so the focus of this week is to kind of develop a value proposition. Earlier this week I did a first mentor talk with Ronja Stoffregen, which clearly highlighted that I had to pivot a bit my ideas, which I've tried to do in the past days. And actually yesterday I did another mentor talk with another former colleague of mine, actually, Gerrit McGowan. And Gerrit has been the academic director of the Entrepreneurship Center at WHU. So we have quite intensively worked together. We also have done a podcast together. And I reached out to Gerrit to ask if he also wanted to give me some feedback. And as Gerrit today is also in founder mode, I think he could really well understand the process that I'm going through. So again, I will transparently share with you the full meeting that I had with Gerrit, where I discussed my kind of most recent ideas regarding my value proposition. And you will actually see that Gerrit really pushed me to mainly focus not on the solution, but on the problem. So even this week, I think thinking about the problem, your fundamental assumptions is very important. I will first show you the conversation that I had with Gerrit, and then I will briefly reflect on it. So enjoy the show.
Okay, so let me just start explaining a bit what I've been thinking about in the past days. So I started from this pain point that for me, conferences have become this kind of terrible thing where I don't see and that I have any added value from it, especially as being an introvert. And so initially, kind of in terms of solutions, I was thinking like, oh, we need something that can help people to have better matches during a conference, that you can match with other people, have more meaningful conversations. But then I talked with Ronja some days ago, and I think she made some very valid points. And also, I did a kind of competitor analysis, and to be honest, the competition is very established there. So we don't use these apps in the academic world, but you see that there are apps out there that seems to be used in business conferences that, to be honest, do exactly what I had in mind. And I could not really find something to position myself against them. So to be honest, there I had a feeling like there is not really an open space there to enter. So then I actually went a bit more back into the fundamentals, like what is actually the role of conferences? That's about we want to learn something new. We want to get feedback on what we are doing. Some people might want to sell stuff. And so I thought more fundamentally, what could be a kind of alternative for conferences? And more, I had the idea like, so now the problem is always you go to a conference rather unprepared and then you meet the people that you know, but it's quite difficult to meet new people that can be of value. So I think we need a kind of pre-trajectory before the conference where you can already start establishing connections. Now, there are also issues with that because you have always the status issues. If you're an established person, why would you engage up front with younger persons and stuff like that? But so after some brainstorming, also to be honest with GPT, I think an interesting idea that I start to have is, can we not create a kind of platform? And so if you register for a conference, you will become part of that platform. And then the platform, based on your profile, but also based on input that you can give, it will match you anonymously with 2 other people. And then you can start interacting for like 3-4 days. And then based on that, you can decide whether you want to move forward, yes or no. And then you can continue working. And if you then still decide we want to move forward, then actually the identities will be revealed. Yeah? So then you will see with whom you've actually been talking, and then you can continue working together. And then you can use the conference to really meet up face to face. So then the conference will become the point in time where you can really meet each other and go somewhere and have a drink together and celebrate the accomplishments that you did together. And my feeling is it solves a number of pain points, because you first do it anonymous. There is no status issues. So I don't know if I talk with, in my case, academic conferences with a PhD student or with an established scholar, I don't know. And also, as long as it's anonymous, if I then decide this doesn't make sense to me, these people are stupid, or this will not give me added value, you disconnect after 4 days and nobody's really hurt because it was fully anonymous. And then you can go to another round and get matched again and try again. So the risk of feeling harmed or something like that is quite limited in that way. So that's a bit my idea at the moment about how to help people in getting more meaningful connections that you can then celebrate at a conference, something like that.
Okay.
That's a bit my current idea.
Gotcha. Okay. And the problem that you're really solving is that, introverts, I guess we're talking about introverts, right? Because introverts are also like, I want to just bring this to first principles so I understand it clearly, right? So, I am actually, believe it or not, I'm actually an introvert by definition, even though I'm pretty like extroverted and loud and opinionated, but I'm an introvert because I need recharge, right? Like, I think the language they use now is like an ambivert, right? Where I'm like naturally introverted, but I can be extroverted in certain environments. But your idea is that they're introverted people that are almost more shy being kind of part of it, but also just being drained by the social setting and the cognitive load that introverts face. Is that?
Yeah, so my thing is, if you go to conferences, I think networking is important. You want to establish new connections, but I think at most conferences, the assumption on how you do that is heavily based on quantity. You talk with a lot of people, you go out to these big places where there are a lot of people, and that's how you build networks. And I think, especially for introverts, that's not the way we want to build networks. So we need a different way, which I think can also be relevant for extroverts, but especially for introverts, we need a different way to establish meaningful connections. That would be kind of my core assumption, that of course I will also have to test, but at the moment that would be my core assumption.
Does your idea, these ideas that you're exploring, do they solve that objective? Do they meet that objective? Right? Like, have you unpacked what networking actually means to people? I mean, I know I've been to more conferences than I ever hoped to in my life. I don't like those environments either, but you go usually because you have specific objectives in mind. When I was a founder going to conferences is because I was looking for very specific people. I even had I even hired a PR firm. Sometimes I even hired the conference organizers to help me match with the specific people that I were looking for, decision makers at big companies. I can't speak to academic conferences, but I would imagine, you're not going to network with PhD candidates that are there. You're going there to network with academics or funders or whatever that might grant making institutions. I'm not sure, but it's targeted. I would imagine it's more targeted networking. Is that a fair assumption, or are you just going to socialize and just meet new people?
Nah, I think if I go to an academic conference, that's different. One thing is, it's a very efficient place to work with the people you already know. But that's not really, that's more maintaining your existing network. And as you're all at the same place, you can easily talk about papers that you're doing together and stuff like that. That's one thing. I also want to learn something new. I want to learn what are the newest insights that are emerging out of the field. And there, to be honest, actually the PhD students that's not the established professors typically that bring the newest thing. It's actually the PhD students. So from that perspective, actually communicating with PhD students can learn you a lot of new things. And to some extent, you see yourself as a mentor that wants to connect with also PhD students, because also that can mean future collaborations on research projects, producing papers. So it's not that I don't want to talk with PhD students. At the same time, again, and now in these settings, and then you have PhD students from all over the world that get learned. You need to connect with established people. And then you get these very awkward conversations at receptions where people approach you, where you very quickly feel like, oh no, this is not, there is nothing here for me. And then you need to find a way to get out. And then as an introvert, your energy immediately goes down very quickly, you know? So both for, I would say, the PhD students, it's not an attractive way to try to connect because it feels very, how do we say, yeah, it's not nice that then people reject you in your face. And also for the established people, it's not a nice thing because you have to kind of pretend that you're interested and you're not. And it's a very awkward way of connecting, I would say.
It sounds like those are multiple problems.
No.
Like, is the problem introversion or is the problem selection? Right? Like, because there are, I think as Ronya said in you guys' talk, like there are a lot of tools out there that are facilitating kind of more pointed connections, right? Where you've got I remember like apps where you could see all the participants, you could reach out to the specific ones that you wanted, organize to meet for a coffee in a certain area or whatever that might be. But is that...
Yeah, but I would say if you look at these apps, for me, it's still, these are apps that are designed to have a lot of interactions with different people during the conference. But I think for me, that doesn't solve my problem. I don't want to have a lot of 2-minute meetings with a lot of people. I want to have, if I can leave a conference with a limited number of meaningful connections, I would be much more happy than having 50 quite superficial conversations somewhere in a conference hall.
And is a meaningful connection defined by how you connect with someone or how related to your interests they are?
Both, I would say. And so you really need to kind of have the feeling like we can do something together. Yeah, but also socially that you think like, okay, this is a nice person to work with.
And your blind interaction solution, which ones, what does that solve? One or both?
Initially, it's more instrumental because it's anonymous, so you don't really. But you can start to get a feeling like, okay, by having these, is there potentially here a match in terms of intellectual contribution? Do we have the similar thoughts? Do I learn something from you? And that would be my first. If there is no instrumental added value, then yeah, I don't think it makes much sense to invest in it. So that would be for me the first step, and that's why I would do the first phase anonymously. And then when you feel like, okay, there is here sufficient room for really having added value, okay, then you open it up, and then you can have also more social interaction. And then if it continues, then at the conference you can meet each other face to face.
I mean, I'm not one to say ideas are great or they're shit, because in reality, it's whatever you come up with right now would change along the way and become more nuanced. So rather than trying to tear down an idea, I'd rather understand the nuances of it and see if we find breaking points along the way. And the first thing I think about is, I always try to go human behavior first, right? Let's talk about behavior change. And you're talking about behavior change with people that are, neurochemically wired in a particular way, right? Like, you have introverts process dopamine in a different way. They tend to be acetylcholine heavy, right? That makes us kind of, more in our heads and taking more cognitive bandwidth to interact with these situations. So you have kind of hardwired thinking patterns and behavior, and now you're offering a mechanism that requires some type of behavior change and be able to actually utilize it. What is there a point of high intent where a conference attendee would say, this is something I had to do because there's an investment into it.
Yeah.
This is prior to the conference. I'm now investing time, energy, effort. If I'm an academic or I'm a professional, I probably have limited time anyways. My experience with conferences is most of the time, like at least in industry conferences, when I was out there as the startup person looking for corporates in an enterprise startup, I was there on a mission. All of the corporates were there to see their friends that they see twice a year and have cocktails and go to dinner and just catch up with people they don't see during the day, during their normal work life. What do you see as that high intent inflection point that would make people sacrifice time from another aspect of their life into this?
Now, I think if you're a more junior person, you need to create networks.
Mhm.
And again, the more established people, again, they will not have that much time and they will be very selective. So then it's also important that you build networks with your peers that are at the same level, but that you can help each other. Let's say it like that. So I would say initially that would be for me the core customer segment. People that are still quite junior and need to establish that network and can do that in that way. And hopefully then also some more established people are willing to engage in that, then more maybe as a mentor or whatever, but still for them it can also be interesting. But I see your point, and it's something that will trigger additional work, and not everybody is waiting for additional work. That's a fair point.
Well, I think this is an interesting path to explore a little bit, right? Because what you kind of brought up here is a more focused ICP, right? Where you went from conference attendees, which maybe the senior ones there would be less rationale for behavior change. Now you get to the junior ones where they have less of a network and they're just trying to grow their network in their early career to be able to build opportunities with those serendipitous moments. Great. I think that's a step in the right direction. Then you have to start looking at what are the objectives of these junior researchers or junior. Are we talking about academic conferences? Or are we talking about all conferences? To be determined.
Yeah, I've now also simply because that's what I know. I tend to link it to academic conferences, but I would have the ambition to make it broader. If it's only relevant in the end for academic conferences, it will be difficult to make something that is very monetizable, I would say. But
yeah, but solve one small problem first, and then you look away to expand them out. I think it's the perfect pilot market for you, that really well and you have connections into. But I'm just, as you narrow down and now you're getting to, let's say, junior researchers at these conferences, they're going to have different intent, different goals than say you would have at one of those conferences, or at least nuanced in some way. I would want to unpack that a lot more, and I would probably start my iteration loop again. And I mean, is that a market? Is that an adequate market size? Is it big enough pain point that you're creating enough value that it's worthy of a business? And I think one of the big challenges of the adhering strictly to the kind of build, measure, learn, lead startup process is you find real problems, but you don't necessarily find real problems that have value, right? That can be monetized in a way of a business, and sometimes it takes using that pathway to find a problem and then zooming back out to the big picture, or getting to first principles to take another look, right? Because in the end, you still have to look at it through the lens of like, will this make money?
No,
will this create enough value?
No, because it's interesting. In the past week, also because I now communicated via YouTube. Yesterday, I was at another university, and actually, quite some professors say, "Oh yeah, this pain point is really a pain point." But I say, "Yeah, but okay, now I need to find a solution, and that's a bit more difficult." And then also they have no idea how to solve it. So it's like you have this pain point, and that's nice, but now you need to take the step to the solution, and that's still another step, of course.
I would ask them how painful it is. Like, would you be willing to pay for it? You know, would you pay $100 for every conference you went to be able to, you know, is it such an uncomfortable experience? Like, I mean, start with yourself. The N of 1 is the first layer of customer discovery, right? Like, how painful is this for you? Does it keep you from going to conferences and miss professional opportunities? Does it wear you out so much that you're less pleasant when you get back to work or get back home? Like, how bad is it?
No, I think for me it's now less problematic because you reached a certain stage, and then okay. But I think when I was starting, I found it extremely frustrating that you go to these conferences and it's very difficult to build connections. And again, especially if you're an introvert, but even I think extroverts have that issue. I think another problem is a bit that I think then the younger school, the PhD students, they think they need to build networks by building connections with the established people. But actually, it's about building network. What I almost learned by accident is it's by building networks with people from your that are in the same position, and you can jointly grow to the next level. That's the value. But actually, a lot of people don't realize that, and that's a bit also a challenge. I think this can only work if people understand that it's important to network with people from their own level. So you also need to educate them something about that. And so if you say, would they be willing to pay $100 for a platform where they get to know people at their same level? Although I think it might be worth $100, they might not realize that. But that's then a challenge, of course.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, you've got to get to some qualitative understanding of willingness to pay, right?
Yeah.
Am I willing to pay with my time? Am I willing to pay with my money? Am I willing to pay with my energy, right? I think asking people, is it a problem, is the first step. But then, the whole problem piece of the process is, problem, pain point, who feels that pain point, and how painful is it to them, right? So it's going to be really easy to identify a problem, but really understanding who feels that problem the most, how severe it is to them, and how impactful it is. It's really where you're going to get, I think, a lot more. I want to ask you something else. This is the one thing that as I've been reading your posts and watching your videos, I feel that I have an inkling that have an inherent bias coming into this process. And it's like it seems like you've already made up your mind that you want to build tech. Like, your solutions are very app tech, SaaS-y oriented, B2B.
And I met what do you think?
I didn't want to
say that out loud, so I was waiting for you to say that. Like, this is the most ho thing you've ever done.
But, it does seem like, because you went from the conversation with Bronya, now you've kind of iterated and evolved, and now it's just like another feature, right? Like, and you do kind of run the risk of, like, we come up with an idea, and then we start solving the broken parts with features. And this is the path to scope creep. And this is the path to what I see all the time with even experienced founders, which is you start creating these Frankenstein apps, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm taking a leg from here and a head from here and a body from here. And next thing I know, what the hell am I? I'm just a bunch of features from different things, but no clear differentiation and value proposition there. But you're putting yourself a little bit in that position because clearly you don't want to build conferences, you know? I mean, the best way to solve this is to start a conference, right? Where you have total control of the environment and you can create an introvert friendly conference. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to solve a problem that you don't have direct control over. And then you're adding, or because you're talking tech, you're adding replacement value in there, right? So many conferences have software and tools. Very difficult to get businesses to move off existing tools in exchange for new ones. So you have to have generally to do that, you have to have a very utilitarian, rational value proposition. It's cheaper, faster, better, right? Mm-hmm. The conferences are all about, obviously they're trying to make money, right? They're doing that through sponsorships and they're doing that through attendance, right? That is usually their primary revenue sources for those. So how do you create a value proposition that a conference wants to adopt you? It's probably not by saying we're more introvert friendly. It's probably by saying this is going to be way cheaper. It's going to get you more attendees. Your sponsors are going to love it. Something along those lines. So when I think of the problem that you're solving, I think, sure, there's one approach, which is I'm looking at the setting. I'm looking at this conference setting that's not conducive to introverts. And I'm saying, hey, can I plug in technology? There's other sides of it too, which is like, there's the introvert side, like there are ways you could solve the introversion problem more effectively. I mean, look, you've probably been to conferences where you as an introvert had a great experience, or maybe parts of it where you had a great experience. I know I don't like if I'm in this huge room with 1,000 people and chaos going on around, I'm not good at going taking out random people in the crowd. But when I go into a small breakout session with 10, 12 people that's interactive and dynamic, kind of warms me up, right? And then I'm already interacting with people. Now I can spot people in the crowd that I've already met with, and it kind of becomes easier, right? I also know, like, what I used to do when I went to conferences is I did a really hard workout before. Got my dopamine levels cranking, like it changed my brain chemistry. I had higher energy. I was more open and receptive. I'm not suggesting solutions. I'm just saying when you look at a problem, it's really important that you're looking at it from all different angles. Otherwise, you're creating blind spots. And my concern is you're running the risk that you're thinking you're already stuck on technology, which is limiting the scope of your opportunities.
Yeah. I really try to avoid already going into the tech solution, because indeed that's what I'm interested in, because I quickly want to start developing a demo app or platform by vibe coding something, of course, now. But I did not yet do that because I don't want to, because I think first my value proposition needs to be clear. Yeah. But so my feeling is a bit like, and again, I can always pivot later on, but this notion of we need a solution to have more meaningful connections. I think that's for me still a fundamental pain point that I think, and it's broader than just conference and it's broader than introverts. And that might be the most kind of obvious places where you see the need, but I think it's also relevant for other contexts. That's a bit.
I think that's the path that I would be going down if I were you, right? This don't get stuck on the introvert label. The problem should evolve as the solution evolves as well. Maybe you can reverse engineer the good experiences. Like I know you've been to a ton of these events, a ton of these conferences, and I'm sure there were moments in there where you're like, wow, this was a great experience. My guess is it was probably analog. I know in my experiences, it used to involve alcohol, but it was like loosened up, you have these really cool connections at the conference having a drink or something. But I think I would be look at the positive experiences. If you're really interested in technology and would build something, look at the positive experiences that you had in the analog setting and kind of reverse engineer those experiences and see if you can find a way to scale them with technology, right? Technology doesn't create solutions. Technology enables you to scale solutions.
No.
Yeah.
Mm.
So you can think maybe an approach is to how can you prototype a solution without ever using tech, and think about how you would create the solution in the physical world. And then it becomes a lot easier to start thinking about how you can create digital tools. Otherwise, I think you just get into feature creep and scoop creep, which can be challenging.
Yeah, but I have to say, because I did, again, also together with ChatGPT, quite some potential solutions. And me, then it sometimes also suggests, yeah, you need to organize your own conference and do it in an inherently different way. But then I immediately feel that I don't want to become a conference organizer, because, yeah, again, that's also, yeah, that's not my thing. And I think I immediately intuitively feel that's not what I want to do. So I think, yeah, even maybe if that's then the best solution, if it's something you don't want to do, you don't want to do it, not?
Yeah, I mean, think around it though, right? Like maybe maybe there's a solution that is not directly tied to the conference.
No.
Maybe it's happening external of the conference. I mean, I don't want to get into a brainstorming exercise, but some of the coolest experiences I've had at conferences has been a group of people saying, let's get out of here and go have dinner together, you know? And sure, it was self-selected and maybe it was organic and not so structured, but it was usually a group of people say, all right, this isn't really adding a lot of value, but you folks are interesting, you know, let's go deeper there.
Yeah, but that was a bit my initial idea that I had with Ronja, not that it's like, let's decentralize conferences, and instead of focusing much more on this one place where everybody meets, give people opportunities to go out and have, with a limited amount of people, meaningful interactions. But again, and maybe with Ronja, it was already too much app-driven and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, keep in mind, like, you know, Ronya is one ICP, right? And when you were talking to her, you were talking in a very broad perspective, and she was coming at it from the position of the corporate, right? She is the person that's in demand, right? She is the one that's getting a lot of outreach. She's not the junior that's looking to build relationships. So, you know, that's the whole point of discovery, is that it, like, in a way, it's probably good that I came after Ronya because, you know, I'm not a junior, but as a founder, I'm the one that's on a mission looking to connect with specific people. Ronya is probably on the other side where people are looking to connect with her. Where it gets interesting, I think, is understanding, I would advise you to talk to young academics, young researchers that are just trying to build their networks. That's, you know, whittling down the ICP a little bit. As long as you're very broad on who you're solving the problem for, you're going to get, it's going to get hard to find signals that are pushing you in the right direction. So what I'm kind of taking away from this is you got to go back to the problem loop a little bit and refine that problem, pain point, who feels that pain point the most, and how painful is it, you know? So if you take the idea, you know, you came with this idea of introverts at conferences, maybe go a step deeper and define that a little bit richer, and then try to talk to some people that fit that profile a bit more. But I think as long as you're trying to serve the senior people that don't want to be bothered and the junior people that are trying to build relationships, you can see there's a tension and a conflict there.
No, that's a very good point. Or you need, No, it's true. No, and it's also what I learn my students. You need to define your optimal customer segment, which is this very small group, then really understand their problem, and then, so that's what I also need to do.
Yeah, I mean, what the magic of the early phase is being able to jump between being deep in the weeds, zooming out to the 10,000-foot view, jumping back into the weeds again. And I think we like to map this as this really nice funnel in, but in reality, it's zooming in, popping back out, zooming in, popping back out. And I think you need to zoom in, find a more pointed problem, a more
Based on your experience, because kind of the boundary condition I face now is a bit is time pressure. I mean, by next Sunday, I need to create a video with my next value proposition, because otherwise my experiment collapses a bit. And on the one hand, that's a bit frustrating because I feel now pressure to come to something. At the same time, I think it's actually good because you can continue to think about something and try to make it as perfect as possible. And it will never be perfect. In the end, it will just change over time by doing iterations. But so what is your perspective on that?
I mean, I have mentored quite a few of your classes now. And every time I've come out of those classes, I've said, there's not a single business model that I would invest in, but there are a bunch of founders that I would invest in, and I think that's the key, right? The output in a short time frame is unrealistic, right? But adhering to good process, iterating and learning is the marker of success. So I think I would just say, hey, you've got a limited time frame. How fast can you move in that time frame? I would rather see you in 8 weeks. And I know this is probably not what you would want your students to hear, but in 8 weeks or whatever, I would be less concerned about, do I have a presentation ready business model? But I would say, like, how good, the steps that you have gone through, how good are they? In the real world, you're not jumping too far. You may jump ahead, but then you're constantly going back. I've been at this latest venture for 4 or 5 months now, and we still go from business model back to problem, right? We like to think it's this linear process, but the loops are actually much bigger, right? So you get to a sticking point and then you have to kind of revisit back. So, I mean, I think you just have to be patient with it, you can still build something, because I think that's the end goal here, right? Is to build a prototype and really make some progress in this process. You kind of need to do that anyways. I've become less of a believer in I'll put it this way, customer discovery. This discovery process is really great for validating a problem. It's really bad for validating a solution. The only way you can really validate a solution, which I think is defensible, is you put something in people's hands and they get to experience it or use it or play with it or whatever that might be. Otherwise, we all perceive things differently. Rania might have had a picture in her head about what you were talking about that was vastly different from mine, because we're filtering it through our own positions and our own experiences. So, I mean, I think you have a rough problem solution hypothesis. You get something in people's hands, and that's where then the trajectory of learning will speed up substantially. Problem is a lot of times there's sunk cost that's lost. But good thing is you're the vibe coding AI guy. You can build shit really quickly. See, this is why you need technical co-founders, right? You need to be able to iterate and build stuff fast, get it in people's hands, and be willing to throw stuff away. But I mean, I think it was Sam Altman that said not so long ago that this is the era of the idea guy.
No, but I think your feedback on I need to focus much more on a specific type of person. I think that because I now start to see that I try to address the needs of different groups, and then it gets fuzzy, and then you're just throwing features together, and then you're not really solving the problem. You're just building features. You're not solving the problem.
I mean, you should be able to see it just from talking with Ronan and I, right? Like, we're very different personas in terms of the type of people that go to a conference, right? So I think you'd immediately discovered as like, well, one group has like this challenge with it. The other one has a completely different challenge. Why? Because we have different goals of going to these events. And then you articulated the junior versus the senior academic. So all that is the signal, which is go back to problem, pain, and who feels that the most. And I think once you land on, okay, this is the specific pain point and specific target person that feels that, the ideas will get stronger and more defensible farther down the process.
Yeah. No, makes sense.
One step forward, two steps back, as usual.
No, that's part of the game. That's part of the game. So that's okay. No, but it's also intriguing to try to do it.
When is your next conference?
Actually, no idea. Yeah, this is not really the conference season in our environment. It's more the spring, summertime. So that's
because that would be in real world practice. That's where I would tell you to go next. And you can bring out your qualitative research side or talk to people.
Yeah, that's true. Good. Then I would say thanks for the inputs.
My pleasure, man. I think it's great that you're doing this, and it's hard. and look, your biggest challenge here is your very, very ambitious timeline.
Yeah.
So
it's also what we force on the students. So it's also fair now. I cannot now say, oh, you need to follow this timeline. I can take more time. That would not make sense. And of course, and that's always in an educational setting. That's always the restriction. And you need to fit it into a certain schedule, and that brings along limitations. And we need to be honest about it. But it would not be a bit strange that I give myself the luxury to spend more time. That would be a bit strange.
Sure. I would just say that front load your effort.
No.
Right? If you put more effort at the beginning, if you nail the problem, there's more solutions. It's easier to build. Unfortunately, I think people rush through problem and they focus mostly on solution, and then they build something that nobody gives a crap about. So front load your effort here. You could spend half of this 8 weeks focusing on the problem. You'll probably end up with a better result than the people that started, crafting the nuances of their solution early on. And I think that's where a lot of people fail. So.
Yeah. Perfect.
Good luck. I can't wait to see the results.
You can follow it. So you can follow whether I now bluntly ignore your comments.
You probably should, like, I think that there's one other message too, is like, you can process yourself to that. Like, I'm an investor in a startup, and they are so data centric. They're so data oriented that they're moving so slow that they're actually just going to whittle themselves out of money and time, and I think there is still a very important place for intuition. And really great founders who are data centric, but also intuitive. And sometimes you just have to say, I trust myself here. I think in the end, the big game changers are the contrarian thinkers. So sometimes you have to go against the grain and take that leap of faith. But
no, but in this case, where I definitely agree with you is I need to narrow my core customer segment and then think what is now exactly the problem they have, and then whether it's now the solution, I think about another solution, but because otherwise I will not make progress.
Good luck, buddy.
Thanks.
Excited for you.
Yes, so that was my conversation with Gerrit, and I think you could all notice that Gerrit was not really giving a final opinion on my value proposition, and I think that's actually often what mentors don't have to do, but was really pushing me to go back to the problem and think about who is really suffering from the pain point, what are your fundamental assumptions. So that means that I now actually have to take a step back and try to define my customer segment in a more narrow way, and then use that to come up with a more fine-grained value proposition. So that will be kind of my task for the upcoming 48 hours, because I'm kind of reaching the end of week 2. So there is some time pressure here, but I hope that by the end of the week, I can further optimize the value proposition that I have in mind. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video, that you could learn something from it, how these mentor conversations typically go. And I promise you that I will give you another update at the end of week 2 to kind of share my final value proposition that has emerged out of this week. Okay, thanks for your attention. Bye.